All right. Good morning, everybody. I think I told you this the other day, but just in case I did not, I'm awaiting. Supposedly, I'm going to have a prospective student come in here and sit in. He's not here yet, and we're not sure if he's coming or not, but that's the reason that we're having class today, as opposed to you having another day to work on your test. Now, to start, what I want to tell you is I went out yesterday and I went to everybody's GitHub repository. All right. And everything that you have that you've done over the last 3 weeks, I copied so I can grade tomorrow morning. Now, I understand that people have not yet done the, a couple people have actually turned in the test already. All right. But most people have not, and that's okay. All right. But I do want to mention something to you. All right. If you go into InsideRankin.org and you look at the grade book for you, what you'll see is your current grade. But if you are missing assignments, okay, so if there's stuff that you have not turned in, be they tests, homework, written tests, labs, it doesn't matter. Right now, they're not counted. They're not in there at all. In other words, they're just not shown. All right. I've been told I'm not supposed to do that. So what I'm going to do when I get done grading on Friday, and I'm going to hopefully start grading first thing tomorrow morning. But when I get done grading, then anything that you have not turned in is going to go in as a 0. Now, that doesn't mean it'll stay as a 0, but it'll go in as a 0. And of course, that could markedly affect your grade if you've got a lot of stuff missing. So if that happens, and if it turns out that pushes you down so that at least currently you'd be a D or lower, then what I am supposed to do, just so you see this, is on my inside ranking, we've got a thing over here that's called an early alert message. And if you've got a D or below, I have to send one of those out for you. They don't become part of your permanent record or anything like that. It's just to let you know, and also to let our student success counselor know that I've got one or more people who currently have a D or below. All right. The other thing I want to tell you, okay, is from now on, all right, so we'll start this next Monday. I don't want anybody else to be sending me their homework and their stuff via email. Everything's got to go through GitHub. If you say I don't get GitHub, go back and watch the lectures, please. It's just getting too hard. Literally, I've got probably upwards of 1,000 emails that I've gotten from people this semester, and I'm not exaggerating. All right. And it's too hard for me to dig through there and look for assignments that you have. All right. So from now on, like I said, that's what I'm going to expect. All right. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to go over the Muroc text, chapters 8 and 9 on jQuery. All right. I was going to prepare a couple problems as well. I didn't have time to do that, but we are going to do actually a problem when we start. All right. On Monday of next week, as it says, we'll cover 10 and 11. I also told you, if you weren't here yesterday or haven't heard the video, that on Monday, I'm going to literally in front of you do test number 1, JavaScript test number 1. You remember that had like 6 problems on it. There was 1 is the loneliest number and all that other stuff. All right. That means that if you don't have your test turned in, really by Monday morning, you do get a 0. There's nothing I can do about that. All right. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to do the same thing next week with the chapter 2 test, or the JavaScript hot 2. And the following week, I'll do the one that you're working on right now. Okay. All right. So next week, again, we'll complete the JavaScript jQuery section covering 10 and 11. And like I said, I will also go over test number 1. All right. The rest of the week, we're going to create a website together that utilizes JavaScript, jQuery, HTML, and CSS. All right. I don't remember if I made it super responsive or not, I'll look at it this weekend. All right. Okay. So this Sunday by midnight, both your chapter 6 and 7 written tests and homework are due, and your JavaScript hands-on test, JS Hot 3, are due. Finally, and I mentioned this yesterday, a week from tomorrow, not tomorrow, a week from tomorrow, there will be no class because Rankin is closed due to the Veterans Day observance. All right. So with that said, let's get started. Now, what I sent you this morning, just so you know, I sent it after I sent the initial email, was I sent you this. All right. And what it has in there is a jQuery example, all right, which doesn't have a lot in it. It also has an article that the jQuery example uses, and we're going to go over that in a minute. Plus, I may or may not have mentioned this to you the other day. I don't remember, but there is a site out there that's called Goal Kickers, goalkickers.com. And they've got all sorts of, all right, maybe it's Goal Kicker, but we'll find it anyway. All right. They have all sorts of free books on just about anything you can think of. So I grabbed the jQuery one, as it says, it's 50 some pages, and it's saved in a PDF format. So it's right here. I'm not going to go over any of it, but it's right there if you want some additional information on jQuery. And if you don't, okay, that's fine. All right. The other thing I want to mention, and I know you hear me say this all the time, but once again, the jQuery tutorial that's in here on W3 Schools is very good. It's more extensive than a lot of the other ones, but notice there's examples, references, Ajax, which we don't talk about till the last week of class, traversing through stuff, using it with HTML, special effects like animation, etc. All right. So I'm not going to go through any of that, but it's something, again, as we start to go through this, if you're having trouble, you might want to take a look at it. All right. The other thing that I want to mention is, hopefully you've all seen this, as far as, okay, so you've got homework that is due on Sunday, right? And what is that homework? So let's take a look at it. The first thing is, remember, there's 113 lessons in that free codecamp.org, learn JavaScript, algorithms, and data structures. All right, you should be finished with it by the weekend. Okay, you should be finished with that. The other homework that you have then for the weekend, and it looks like it's the same thing, but it's not. All right, it says complete 20% of the ES6 course for free code camp. Well, what I want to show you on this is to make sure everybody understands what it is you're supposed to be doing. So this is the free code camp site, and it, again, it's referenced in your book, or in your homework rather. And this is the one you should have been working on, this basic JavaScript that had 113 little lessons in it. You're supposed to be done with all those by this weekend. All right. Then after that, okay, right after that, there is an ES6 thing that comes right after it. And you'll notice there's 29 lessons in it. You are supposed to create the first or finish the first 5 or 6. All right. Said 20%. So 30 times 20% would be 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. And I am going to make sure, I want us to go through all of the ones that are in here. All right. So that's what you've got to look forward to, or not, depending on your point of view for homework. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to attack this subject of jQuery just a little bit differently than we've done most of them. And what I mean is, the first thing I want to go through, and I gave you this morning, was this article that's an introduction to jQuery. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through what's in here. All right. And it'll take, I don't know, 5, 10, 30 minutes. I don't really know. But we're going to go through all of it. It's not really anything that's going to make you say, oh my gosh, how fantastic is this? But it'll give you, as it says there, an introduction to jQuery. All right. Now, one thing about jQuery, and they mention it right here, the idea is write less, do more. Okay. So what you're going to see almost immediately when we start to go through this is we're going to look at an example of how to just literally write some regular vanilla, regular JavaScript to say hello from JavaScript on the screen, and then to show you what you do to do it in jQuery. All right. So as it says, jQuery is not a programming language. It's a library. It is JavaScript. Just as Bootstrap was designed to work with CSS to give you responsive websites, etc. jQuery is part of JavaScript. It's a library that kind of supercharges JavaScript, and you can use it to bring into your actual jQuery. You can bring CSS right into it. The other thing, as they mentioned there, and you can see it in the underline, the hyperlink there, is jQuery is cross-browser compatible. So if you create something using jQuery and you create it and run it on Chrome, it should look the same way on Edge or on any other browser. All right. Now notice the guide assumes no prior knowledge of jQuery, which is one of the reasons I picked this one. It says you will go through the installation of jQuery. No, we won't, because you don't have to. All right. Important web development concepts are going to be discussed in here. So when we get to those, I'll mention them. Plus, they give you some links in here, and they talk a little bit about jQuery selectors, jQuery events, and jQuery effects. All right. The prereqs, and I think you all meet these now. You've all got a basic understanding or basic knowledge of HTML and CSS, and you've been introduced, all right, you've been introduced to the fundamentals of programming. All right. Now it says, while it is possible to begin writing jQuery without an advanced knowledge of JavaScript, familiarity with concepts like variables and data types will help significantly. We've talked about that already. All right. So the first thing they mention in here is setting up jQuery. I've already mentioned this, but I'm going to go over it again anyway. As it says, jQuery itself is a JavaScript file that you use and you link to your HTML. And there's two different ways of doing it. So let's quickly take a look at both of them. All right, for the first way, and I'm going to go back to this in just a second. If you go out to jQuery.com, it's a very vanilla looking, very plain looking website. But you'll notice that in the upper right-hand corner, it says right away, download jQuery. And you can see that the most up-to-date version of jQuery here is something, it's version 3, all right, release 7.1. All right. Now, if I click on this link right here, it'll ask me if I want to download jQuery, and it'll let me do it in two ways. The first way is compressed jQuery. And when you look at that, it looks like a big mess. That is all of jQuery, but what has happened is they've removed all the unnecessary comments and unnecessary white space from the file. And typically, you really never touch jQuery anyway. So this is a smaller download. Now, if that confuses you, scares you, or whatever, we can go to the uncompressed version. And this is the same file you just saw. But what you'll see is last time I checked, it was around 10,000 lines. But you can look at everything that's in here if you want to do that. Do you have to do that? No. You don't have to download it, period. If you download it, either the compressed version or the uncompressed version, what most people do is they put it in their JS folder. That's not even mandatory, but it's kind of a standard that most people adhere to. All right. Well, I don't want to do that. So I'm going out here to cdnjs.com. CDN for Content Delivery Network, JS for JavaScript. So cdnjs.com. And in here, I've already done it, but I'll type in jQuery. And you'll notice it comes up with a bunch of things, 5 to be specific. The first one is the one that we want. JavaScript library for DOM operations. If you decide to do it this way, it's totally fine. Click the middle link here and it'll say copy script tag. That's the one you want. So you click on that. And then just to show you, because this is what we're going to be working on right now. All right. This is that example that I gave you. I'm going to open that up. This is an incomplete example right now, but I'm going to open it up. And I'm going to open it up inside of Code, Visual Studio Code. Now, I've already got it in here. This is the script tag that you see right here, but I'm going to pretend that I don't have it in here. So again, I went over to here to cdnjs.com. I typed in jQuery. I grabbed the first one that was there, and where it says copy script tag, that's the thing I did. Then I'm coming down into the bottom of my body here, and I'm pasting it in. Now, it's really long. But you'll notice that when I come in and do a file save, because I've got Prettier installed on here, all right, it breaks it down. So the file itself is right here. This is the file. That's jQuery right there. And you'll notice it's using the minified or compressed version. All right. So it is out on CDN.js. All right. But it's cdnjs.cloudflare.com, etc. That isn't important. The important thing is I now have jQuery available in my program. It also has this stuff in it: integrity, cross-origin, and referrer policy. Technically, you don't need any of that in. But the reason they put that in is to let you know, hey, you're downloading a file from the internet. It has been checked to make sure that it is secure. Most people leave it in. You could remove all of that stuff right there that you see, and the program would still work. Finally, please, please, please make sure this is my jQuery, and I'm going to use it in this program. This is my file. Your file must come after jQuery here, because we're probably going to end up using some of the stuff that's in here, and we won't be able to if you put this file after this file. All right. So, I mean, again, that's pretty simple. I get it. So right now, I'm not even going to run this, but I will save it. But there's nothing in here except a couple script designations. So if I ran this right now, it would have a title of jQuery demo, but there'd be nothing at all in the file because there's nothing in the body other than these 2 script designations. So let's continue on then. Close these. All right. So that was the setting up jQuery. All right. And again, they talk about what a CDN is. You can look at it as basically it's a big repository. In other words, someplace, somewhere out on the cloud, someplace, somebody has got all this stuff saved, and you can use it and bring it into your program. I did mention this in an earlier class, but I want to say it again. If you do this, if you bring yours in the way I just showed you, like this, all right, if we bring it in like this, and I think I got another one here too, I'm going to close that one. All right. So if we bring it in like this, you must have an internet connection then, because we are going out to the internet to find jQuery. If you copy it into your JS folder, either the compressed version or the non-compressed version, then you wouldn't say source equal this. If you had it in your, let's say that you saved it saved it as jQuery.js, and you saved it into your JavaScript folder. Then you'd have something that would look like this. You'd have script source equal JS / jQuery.js script. So this is a little more work, but I don't have to go out. I don't have to, worry about it. I'm grabbing it from here. If there's any updates that have been quickly made to this, I should have them because I've got the latest and the greatest. All right. Okay. Now let's continue on. As it says, they're using a CDN to reference jQuery in their examples. Fine. It says you will begin this exercise by creating a small web project. Now, because I always do it like this, I do have an index.html file. I've got a CSS folder with mine is styles.css, and I've got a JS folder with script.js. So I have all this stuff. All right, I've got all that in there right now. Then in here, I've linked to the style sheet already, so there's nothing new there. All right, and I've linked to jQuery, and underneath it, as I said, I've also linked to my own file. So everything that they show in here, we have. All right, and I already mentioned this, but I'm saying it again if you look at the top of the screen, and that is your JavaScript file, scripts.js, must be included before the jQuery library, or this will not work. All right. Now it says at this point, the jQuery library is loaded into your site and you have full access to the jQuery API. That's a hyperlink, so let's click it. All right, and you'll notice it's going out to api.jquery.com. What the heck is that? Well, if we had gone out to jquery.com ourselves like this, and then someplace over here, I don't know where it is, but someplace over here, there it is. jQuery core API documentation. That's where you're going. So this, in a nutshell, this is jQuery. As you watch the stuff in gray here. I've never counted, I don't care, but I'm sure there's well over 100 different routines in there that you can use to do all sorts of stuff. If you go to any of these routines, all right, so I'll just grab the first one, which is add, and you click on it. It brings you up to the documentation page. It explains to you the syntax, how to use it, what it does, and then a little later down farther down on the page, they give you an example of how you can use this. All right, this you can just literally grab the code from here, bring it in, and use it if you'd like to do that. All right. Now, the other thing they mentioned here, and I just want you to be familiar with the term, and that is they talk about an API. And basically, an API is a contract. And it's a contract that you are making. It's between you and jQuery. And jQuery is saying, hey, I'm going to provide all of this stuff for you to use. You can use any of it or all of it, but you must use it in the way that it's been set up to be used. That's the contract part. They call it an interface there. That's totally fine. I probably have mentioned this before. Maybe I did even last week, but I do. You are to the point now where you should all be able to understand the difference between these two terms, those being interface and implementation. All right, interface is what the end user sees. The interface that you have right now is through Teams. You're watching this on Teams, be it live or on video, but that's your interface. All right. I'm not sure exactly what the software is that makes all this stuff happen. That's the implementation. So the implementation is hidden typically from you. You see the interface. And as you can see with API, the I stands for interface. But again, I typically look at it as kind of being, for lack of better words, more or less a contract between you and the software, where the software says, this is what I'm providing for you, but you have to do it and use it in the way I want you to use it. All right, so let's continue on. So using jQuery, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these 2 lines of code. All right, so let me grab this one, copy it to the clipboard. Now, in our file right here, I'm going to go out, and under JS, I'm going to go out to script.js, and you'll notice it's empty. All right, there's nothing in there. So I'm going to paste this in. Now, we've done this thing where we use the $sign, but I'm putting the whole command in here because that's what they're doing. And I'm going to change this from hello world to hello world from JavaScript. All right. And we can come in here and word wrap it. Okay. Now, by now, you should all be able to understand the following. And that is, okay, if I go out into my HTML file and I find something with an ID of demo, all right, and we don't even have that in there. We're going to make it in a second, all right? But if I have something in there with an ID of demo, what I want you to write in there is hello from JavaScript. Now, we're going to make 2 of these. So I'm going to call this one demo.js for demo JavaScript. And we're going to make another one in a couple minutes that we'll call demo.jq for jQuery. All right. Right now, if I ran this program, it wouldn't show. And it wouldn't show because I don't have anything in my program right here that's called demo.js. So I'm going to make it right now. All right. So I'm going to come in here into my program. And we can do this in a lot of ways, but I'm just going to make a paragraph. So I'm going to make a paragraph here, and the ID is going to be equal to demo.js. So right now it's an empty paragraph. All right. But what I'm telling the system is go out and find that thing called demo.js and set the text in the paragraph so that it says hello from JavaScript. Let's see if indeed that works. So I'm doing a save all, I'm going back into here. If that works, what you should see on the screen is hello from JavaScript. And there it is, or hello world from JavaScript. All right. Now, is that big a thing? No. All right. But the point is, you saw what it took in order to put that in there. All right. Now, I'm going to show you, and I'm going to have to make a change to it, but I'm going to show you how we basically put the same thing in here, how we put the same thing in jQuery. And it'll look similar to what we've done in the past. So bear with me for a couple minutes and we're going to go over all of it. So it's a $sign. And I'll call it, again, demo JQ for jQuery. I'm going to make that in just a second. .html, hello world from jQuery. All right, that's all we need. So hopefully one of the things you see is it's a lot smaller. All right, the problem is in its current configuration, it won't work. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add another paragraph. But this ID is going to be JQ for jQuery. Whoops, try that again. JQ. All right. Now, when I run this program, you're still going to see the hello world from JavaScript. You will not see the other one. All right. And that's okay. We're going to fix it in just a moment. But when I bring this up, you still see the hello world from JavaScript. Boom. And if I go in here and I view my page source, all right, notice what it shows me. It doesn't show me the actual text. All right. So what if I wanted to actually see that text? I think I can right mouse click on here and choose inspect. All right. And it'll go down and I have to start looking. I see I've got the dots in here, and there it's showing me hello world from JavaScript. All right. I didn't write that in. That got written in for me. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, right now, this won't work. Okay. And the reason that it won't work is kind of explained in the document. So I'm going to go back to it. All right. It says compare these two and you'll see the difference in how both are written. All right. It says the example demonstrates how jQuery can achieve the same end result as plain or what's typically called vanilla JavaScript. At its core, jQuery is used to connect with HTML elements in the browser via the DOM. I'm not going to go over this. We talked about the DOM before. All right. I just did right mouse click on that on the thing and did the view page source. All right. Now, it says here, this is the important part. The outermost layer of the DOM, the layer that wraps the HTML node, is the document object. So what you typically end up doing is putting all of your jQuery code inside of this. I'm going to copy this right now, and I'm going to modify what we have in there, and we're going to go over all of it. So I'm going to put it there, and I'm going to grab this that you see right here, and I'm going to put it in here. And I will tell you, it will work now. All right, just let me prove it to you, and then we'll come back. All right, it should at least. I don't think I made any mistakes. It should now say hello world from JavaScript, and underneath that, it should say hello world from jQuery. Of course it doesn't. All right, so I did, we'll make sure that, let's see, JQ. So let's look at all of it first. Let's do this. See if I made any mistakes. Now, this thing right here, all right, that thing basically is known as a wrapper. It starts here and it ends here. We're saying once the document is ready, this is the function that we want you to call. I want to say that again. This is saying once the document is ready, this is the function I want you to call. All right. You say, well, it didn't work. And all I have to do is make one change. Since I'm doing it like this, I need the pound sign. And it should, repeat, should work now. And there it is. All right. So, you might say, well, fine, I don't care. Well, you should care. All right. Again, if I right mouse click on this and choose inspect, all right, notice now it's written out there, hello world from jQuery. All right. So it worked, but I don't really expect that. It probably makes a boatload of sense to most people. It's like, okay, it worked, but I mean, why am I using this? What did it buy me, etc. Well, if we go back to here and to here, this says basically this is saying, once the DOM has been loaded, we want you to call this function. And the function is, again, find something that has an ID of demo JQ. All right. Set the HTML up for it to hello world from jQuery. Notice too, we've got inner HTML here, and we've got HTML here. I believe, I could be wrong here, but I don't think I am. I think we could put a strong tag here, and we could put an ending strong tag here. All right, file, save all. Now, when we just looked at it, you'll notice it's already bolded. All right, so boom, the changes took place immediately. Now, that isn't that big a thing, because to be honest with you, I think we can put it in here also, but I could be wrong. So again, I'll do a file, save all, and we'll take a look. And now they're both bolded. All right. Now, believe it or not, this isn't typically the way you're going to do this. And we're going to be getting into that over the next couple class periods. What I want you to understand is this. This right here is your document. This is saying once it's ready, so once the DOM has been loaded, we want you to call this function. Now, you may or may not have noticed, but if you look, this right here is the beginning of the call to the function. There is the end. So there is the beginning left parenthesis. There is the end right parenthesis. There is the beginning left curly. There is the ending right curly. So in between our beginning and end is the code that we want to put in here. That's what we're doing. So again, we don't have to do this kind of thing if we're doing this. So yeah, you're actually probably have more keystrokes here than you have here. But I can put a whole bunch of stuff underneath here then. And you're going to start seeing an example of that in just a bit. All right. So let me jump back here into the document. As it says, all jQuery code will be wrapped in the above. jQuery will detect this state of readiness. What does that mean? That means it's only going to run this code once the DOM is ready for the code to be executed. And as it says, even in some cases, JavaScript won't be loaded until L elements are rendered, including this block, is considered the best way of doing it. So in other words, there's other ways you can write this, but this is considered the most acceptable way. So what they had you do in here was just change this demo. I made 2 of them, but they had you just change it, all right? And they reused it with jQuery. I made 2 of them so you could see them both. Now notice what it says. jQuery is called with and represented by the $sign. That means we're not going to be using that query selector or the query thing when we did the get element by ID like we did before. The $sign has a certain meaning in jQuery. All right. It says you access the DOM with jQuery, mostly using CSS syntax, and then apply an action, meaning what do you want to have happen? And that gets put into a method. All right. So that's kind of the syntax right there. And this is the same type of syntax we put in right here. All right. So we told it that the selector was an ID named demo. The method we wanted to run on it was the HTML method. And this, all right, was basically what we put inside of the method. In other words, what we're passing to HTML. So again, I just want you to see this. If I go back to here, all right, which was that API, and I work my way down enough, let's see, F, J. There's HTML right there. So if I click on that, if you want more, you can go out there and take a look at it. And again, there's an example here. And even notice, they even show you a demo. All right. And this is the code. And when you run it, you'll see what's going to happen. All right. Says if you're confused by the DOM before, you can see it in action now. That's what I just did, was I right mouse clicked on it and chose inspect. All right. Now, jQuery has a lot of stuff that's built into it. And one of the things that's built into it is some stuff that are called selectors. And it says selectors are how you tell jQuery which elements you want to work on. All right, it says most of these you're already familiar with from CSS, meaning, all right, if I put in double quote P double quote, that's a paragraph. Double quote H1 double quote, that's an H1 tag. All right, double quote # demo double quote, that's something with an ID of demo. Double quote period demo double quote, that's something with a class of demo. All right. So again, says we can view the full list of jQuery selectors. So we're back here in the api.jquery.com, but we chose a category and that category, those are selectors. These are all different things that you can work with. There's not 100 anymore. There's probably about 30 or so. All right. To access a selector, it says you use the $ followed by the parentheses. We just did that. We had the $, then in parentheses, we had pound demo. All right. And there are more examples right here. Again, there's an ID of example. All right. There's a class of example. There's a paragraph, etc. It says generally classes and IDs are what you're going to work with most of the time, either your own or things that are built in. All right. Now, there was really no advantage. I want to say that again. There was really no advantage to us in this program that we just looked at doing this right here as opposed to doing this. You could even argue that this is a disadvantage because it's more typing. And I don't know if it is or not, but it's probably pretty close to being more typing. So who cares? I mean, then why do you even use this if that's the case? Well, one thing that jQuery can do, and it does well, is respond to different events. As it says there in that hello world example, the code ran as soon as the page was loaded. Nothing special about it. Says you could have written the text directly into the HTML and not even use jQuery. But it says you will need to use jQuery if you want to make text appear on a page with the click of a button. So in other words, if we want something to happen based on the result of something else, all right, then a good way of doing that is to use jQuery. All right. So to show you then what I mean here is we're going to go back into here. The first thing we're going to do is go back into our HTML. And I'm going to comment out this line right here that says demo.js. All right. I'm also going to, for now, that's all I'll comment out, just that line. So I still have my demo jQuery here. So in other words, if I save this and I run this, okay, don't know why I didn't get anything, but let's see. Not sure why I didn't get anything, but it's okay because we're going to in just a minute. In fact, it's probably because I had this code in there. So let me comment this out as well. All right. All right, there's my hello world from jQuery. That's fine. All right, I'm going to leave this here. All right, but what I'm going to do is above it, I'm going to put in a button. All right. And this is taken right from this article I gave you. All right. What we want to have happen, and we're going to do this by changing our jQuery that you saw on the previous page. What we want to have happen is, if you look on the screen right here, let me run this. It's not going to look any different. Okay, we still have that. But right now we've got a button, but nothing happens here when you click the button. What we want is we don't want this to be showing until you click that button. So in other words, we are going to be putting some text on our web page based on a button click event. All right, so that's what we want to do. So I'm going to go back into here where we are right here. All right, and I'm going to copy this as most of the code I can use and paste it. But I'm going to take what was in here before, sorry, and I'm going to, oh, come on, Jeff. And I'm going to comment this out. All right. And now in here, I still want my document ready, but I don't, before this, I want to come in here and I want to do this. All right, now I'm going to take this line and I'm going to put it in here. Now, you might say, is this a big deal? Let's run it and then come back and, for lack of better words, kind of dissect what we just did. So file, save all, go back to the HTML, and let's run this. Now you'll notice it doesn't show, but when I click me, something's wrong. So we'll fix it. All right. Well, if we inspect and if we go to the console, it's telling us a live code. So there's something wrong simply in my syntax. We still have in here, all right, that ID. So that's good. So let's look in here and see if I missed something. All right. We've still got our document.ready, followed by the word function, our parentheses, our curly brace. All right. Then in here, $trigger. All right. And you'll notice there's what I forgot again was a pound sign. In English, what this is saying is, hey, once the DOM has been loaded, all right, if I click something with an ID, of trigger, once I click it, call a function which will write on the screen, all right, hello from jQuery, and it'll write it by finding something with an ID of demo JQ and putting it out there as HTML. Now let's try it and see if it works. Let me close it. I've got this open in a bunch of places here. All right. So here it is. Let me refresh and click me. And there it is. Now, again, you might still be saying to yourself, okay, fine. Yeah, you showed me you can get that to work. Big, hairy deal. This is where a lot of the interactivity that many websites have comes into play. I want to tell you something, and that is everything we're doing here in jQuery, you could do in regular plain vanilla JavaScript. You could do it there, but typically it would involve a lot more code. That's one of the reasons jQuery was created. All right. Now, over the years, jQuery has its naysayers. There are some people who think it's the best thing ever. There are some people who think it stinks. All right. And you're always going to have something like that. All right. But I will tell you, the last time I had checked, I think it was the top 85% of the websites in the world that are most often accessed. There's people who do data analytics like this, but it's the top 80 or 85% of all the most accessed websites use some jQuery. Some of them use a lot of jQuery, some of them just a little bit. I will also tell you, we went over Bootstrap already. Now, Bootstrap 5 literally is about a year or two old. I think it's about 2 years old now. Might be a little even more than that, but I think it's around 2 years old. One of the changes that they made in Bootstrap 5 was they took the dependency to jQuery out. All right, you don't have to use jQuery anymore with Bootstrap. We did not. Had I taught this class a couple of years ago, if we were using a version 4, we would have had to have made sure that we included this, all right, in our program to be able to use Bootstrap. All right, let's finish this up and then we'll take a break. Now, as it says here, an event is any time the user interacts with the browser. Normally, interactions are done with the mouse or they're done with a keyboard. All right, it says the example we just looked at was a click event. So again, if we go out to the jQuery documentation, we can find a full list. This category was events. We looked at a category of selectors. This is a category of events. So again, it's a subset. All right, it's a subset of what we looked at before. And you'll notice in here, well, lo and behold, there's click. All right. I'm going to show you something. I don't even know if this is going to work, but there's also one in here that's called toggle. All right. And what toggle is designed to do is it's designed to turn something on and then turn something off. In fact, we'll look at it, I guess, in a little bit. I was going to say, I don't think if I just came in and put a toggle in there instead of click, I don't think that that would work. I'll try it, but I don't think this is going to work. But I'm going to come in here and try changing that to toggle. All right, and maybe you saw it. The button was there. Watch, the button will be there and it'll disappear. There it is. When something toggles, it's like a light switch. You click it and it turns it on. You click it again and it turns it off. All right. I didn't think that was the way we'd use it, but we're going to look at a couple things with toggle in a bit. All right. So I'm just going to change that back to click. Let's finish this up and we'll take our first break. All right. Some of the events that you'll use most often are shown here. All right, click, we've already looked at. Submit when you submit a form. Hover if you take your mouse and you put it over something. All right. Key down. All right. Scrolling, etc. And there's more as well. And the last thing that's mentioned in here on the last couple pages of this document are effects that you can use with jQuery. All right. So in order to use that, this is what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this code right here. And again, I'm going to copy it. Now I'm going to go back to my HTML that was in here. All right. And now I am going to take this, let's see, this button that's got the ID of trigger, and I'm going to comment that out as well. All right. And I'm going to put in its place this. Let's quickly talk about what this is. And it looks like my ending button tag didn't copy over, so let me copy that. Oh, it did. I'm sorry, it's right here. Okay. Let's see, button, 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 button. Okay, that's fine. All right. So we're going to have a button on our screen in just a moment. And that button will say open. You're not going to see this right here. You're not going to see this. Okay, until we come in and put in some CSS. But what's going to happen in just a moment is you're going to have a button and the button will say open. When you click it to open it in the middle of the screen, it's going to draw kind of a light gray square, 200 pixels by 200 pixels. And in the upper left-hand corner of that square, it'll have another button that says close. And when you click the close button, it'll go away. When you click the open button again, it'll come back. All right. All right. So to do that, I've already added the HTML. So let's go in and let's find our CSS, which right now, as you can see, is empty. All right. This is if you're following along in the book or the handout I gave you, it's the bottom of page 9. The first thing we're putting in here is display none, which means by default, it will not show. We're putting a position fixed in there, which means it's going to be in the same spot on the screen. We're going to set the top to 50%. We're going to set the bottom to 50%. Nope, the top to 50% and the left to 50%. That should put it pretty much right in the center of the screen. All right. And then we're going to transform. This is all stuff from earlier chapters in our, actually that's from like near the end of our HTML CSS book. All right, translate. And again, if you don't know what that means, watch in just a second. Minus 50%, minus 50%. 3 more lines. A height of 200 pixels, a width of 200 pixels, and a background. They made it gray. I'm going to make it light gray. Not green. All right, so that's everything. That's our CSS. We're saying do not show it at the beginning. Put it in a fixed position where it's pretty much in the center of the screen. All right, with that height and that width and that color. Now, it's still not going to work. Okay, I don't think it's going to work at least until we go back and we have to make changes again into our JS. So again, I'm going to grab all of this and I'm going to copy it right below. And we'll fix that one in a moment. Then I'm going to take this and I'm going to comment out this whole thing here. All right. So we still have the document.ready. We still have the trigger and the click function. But what we want to have happen is this is going to be different now. All right. We're going to put in $, dot overlay. This is our toggle, dot toggle, like that. Now, it may not seem like much, and this isn't what I call like the most gee whiz type of example, but let's look at it. So I'm going to do a save all. I'm going to go back and run this from inside of my HTML file. Click. Oh, doggone it. Still not showing me an error, but it still means I put something wrong in there in the syntax. All right, I've got my pound trigger. So let's look. Document.ready is good. $. Oh, trigger is a class now. It's not a method anymore. They put it in there as a class. So instead of a $, it had to be a dot. All right, so let's run it again. And there it is. Now, this, again, is not that this is gee whiz, but what you've seen is based on user input in this case, we're writing something right to the screen. And it's a toggle. So if I click it once, it comes, click it again, it leaves. So I can close it by either clicking the close button, or I can close it by just clicking open. This is the toggle effect right here that you're seeing. All right. So to finish up this article that we've been going over, all right, as it says, effects work hand in hand with events to allow you to add things like animations. All right, and manipulate elements on a page. By the end of the period today, we'll look at, not extensive, but we'll look at an animation example. All right, so they tell you to go in and change the HTML, add the CSS, and then as it says, go back in here and change the JavaScript. All right, so again, these are some of the most often used effect methods. Toggle, like I mentioned, is like a switch, like a light switch. You click it, it's on. You click it again, it's off. Fade toggle is the same kind of thing, but what it does is it works with opacity. So in other words, all right, when you use fade toggle, all right, it's when something fades in, it's usually pretty light and then it gets darker. And when it fades out, it goes in the other direction. You can use slide toggle. So rather than fading, you can have it slide in from the left or the right or from up or from down, and you can go to animate. Now, one last thing, and then we're breaking, and that is, and I've shown you this before. All right, I know that we have looked at this before, but I want to show it again anyway. So let me close a bunch of this junk that's open here. Now, so far, we've gone out and we went to jQuery.com. We talked about clicking here and being able to download jQuery. We went over here to the documentation. And I don't know why, there it is. And then we even looked over here on the side and we looked at effects and we looked at events, etc. All right. But there's another site that's almost the same as this, but rather than jQuery.com, all right, rather than jQuery.com, it is jQueryUI.com. So when I bring that up and hit enter, this is a magical site, so to speak. And you might say, well, why? Because over here are about 20 or 30 different things that you can do. And just to show you quickly, all right, there's toggle, for example. So I can go over here and notice how I can toggle things. Okay, that's like a blind. I can have it explode. All right, I can have it puff, like a puff of smoke. So these are all different things that you can work on in here. So these are interactions, like it says. These are the widgets that are available in here. This is all the different stuff that you can work with. And when you look at this, for example, here, there's an accordion. Well, we've worked with accordions before. All right. The magic, so to speak, that's in here, and we've talked about this before, is all the JavaScript to do this is right there. That's it. And it's telling it, again, this is your H3, just like we did in class. And in a div, you've got your paragraph. This is just garbage text, but you get the idea. All right. And there's a lot of different stuff that you can use in here. You know, effect is really good, the one I showed you, and there's a whole bunch of these that are in here. All right. So we're going to take a break in just a second. When we get done with a break, we are going to jump right into chapter 8. So again, 8 and 9 today, get off to a fast start with jQuery and how to use effects and animations. We'll look at both of those. All right. Then on Monday, we're going to start by me doing your first JavaScript test. All right. JS hot number 1. Then we're going to go in and do 10 and 11. And you may or may not notice, but they're shorter. The one with forms and data validation is just that. We have talked about already how to validate forms using HTML. We have talked before on how to validate forms using JavaScript. But now we're going to bring jQuery into when we get to that point. Then finally, with the plugins and the widgets, I already started to show you some of that stuff with the jQueryUI.com. All right, it is 9:10. Let's take a good 15-minute break here. Come back at 9:25. We're going to jump right into here, get off to a fast start with jQuery. I'll see you back here in 15 minutes. All right, it is 9:25, so let's begin chapter 8. As you can see, it's called Get Off to a Fast Start with jQuery. This chapter starts by showing you how the jQuery library can basically make your life a little easier. There will be 4 applications in this program. The first one is the email application that we've done several times. All right, and we're going to go back and look at how it would be done using jQuery. Then there's an FAQ application, again, very similar to one we've looked at. Then there's an image swap and an image rollover, and we'll look at all of those. All right. So, like I said, I don't want to sit and read to you. All right. jQuery is JavaScript. It's a library that works along with standard JavaScript and with CSS and with HTML to make your life easier. Now, not everybody agrees with that. Some people think that coding like this is very difficult. And of course, when you first start with it, it is. Now, I guess they changed the number here. So it says in 2020, a survey found 74% of the top 10 million websites still use jQuery. So it's not going anywhere. All right. We've already looked at this. We went out to jQuery.com. Okay. All right. You saw, basically, you've seen examples. We talked about the selectors, as they mentioned. We mentioned the cross-browser compatibility, etc. It's free. It's open source, which means that technically you could look at jQuery and you could suggest changes that you could actually provide to the people who have created this software. And if they agreed with you, they could put them in. All right. So how can it simplify? And again, I've said this to you before, to say that simplifying JavaScript development is relative. All right. So what we're going to do in here is we're going to take a look at some examples. Now, they give you 2 of them and they say that the jQuery is easier to read. You may agree with that. You may not. So here is that FAQ application. All right. And here it is with JavaScript and jQuery. Now, notice the add event listener. We don't have that in here anymore. All right. Instead, what we're saying is, hey, when you've got an FQ that comes up, attach a click event to it. All right. And when you do, make this magic stuff in here happen. So the logic that's in here, we're not looping through like this. All right. So most people would tell you it's a little easier, at least it's a little easier to look at. Again, you may agree with that, you may not agree with it. All right. So as far as the basics, as they show right here, all right, when we went out to the jQuery site and we clicked that download button, that's where we were. All right, we talked about the difference. I showed you the difference between the minified version and the non-minified version. Okay. And you'll notice in here that when this book was written, which is probably a good 1.5 to 2 years ago, it was 3.4.1. Now it's 3.7.1. All right. So there's been 3 releases since, not new versions. That's the first number, but releases, which are the second number. All right. And again, you can download it to your computer directly if you want. You can use a CDN, etc. There's also something in here now that's called a slim version of jQuery that you can use. And what it typically does is it doesn't download everything. And what I mean by that is the stuff that it doesn't download is stuff that most people don't use. All right, you can see the timeline in here. Again, that's through, as you can see, about 3 years ago. Now, the only thing I mention in here, or the one thing I'll mention, again, this slim version, as it says, it doesn't include Ajax. We're going to talk about Ajax at the end of the semester, or some special effect types of things. All right. It improves performance because it's smaller, so it loads faster. All right. Again, compressed versions don't have white space, uncompressed do. It says JavaScript or jQuery recommends that you use that integrity checking when you link files to their CDN. What that is going to do, one more time, what we looked at earlier, and you saw that integrity and that other stuff, that basically is saying when you go out to the internet and you find jQuery at that address that was shown, check to make sure that it's a good version. In other words, that it hasn't been modified by a third party or something where it could be compromised. And that's what's in here. All right. The selectors, we started talking about those. Okay. There's two ways that you can do them. The $, as it says there, is a shortcut for using the word jQuery. I don't know of anybody who uses the word jQuery like they show in that second example. All right. So as they mention up above that, to code a selector, you start by creating the $, followed by parentheses, then a set of quotation marks. And in the quotation marks are what you want to work on or what you want to modify. All right. And there's going to be a bunch of examples in here. It says 3 groups of examples. So here is kind of the syntax. So when you start to work on it then, now this is HTML. This isn't changing. We still need to come in here and have classes and IDs, etc. Now look what we have in here. This says select all paragraphs. This says select everything that has an ID of X, everything that has a class of minus, etc. And they work with descendants and adjacents, etc. All right, there's other ways of doing it. Usually when I explain these things to people, children of children, etc., they get confused. There's just always more than one way of you doing the same thing. I think it's okay to suffice to just say that. All right, so how do you call the methods? These are some of the methods. Okay, notice in here, please notice the table. Notice that other than the last example there, which is focus, and you know what that does, or the last 2 examples, and submit, they're all get and set. Again, when you're using get, all right, then the thing appears on the left-hand side of an equal sign. When you use set, it doesn't, I'm sorry, when you use get, it appears on the right-hand side of the equal sign. Right-hand side for get, like we've got here. With set, with jQuery, you don't use an equal sign. You just call it directly. Now, we used value when we were in JavaScript, and val basically is the same thing in jQuery. All right, I'm not going to read these to you, but you can see the stuff that's in there. And the only way to get better with this is to sit and practice with it. That's why, again, next week, we're going to build a 4-page website, and 2 of the pages, all right, we're gonna basically do a frequently asked questions thing, all with jQuery. We're going to do an image, like a rollover type of thing with jQuery. So you're going to be exposed to these, is what I'm telling you. All right. Now, I want you to see this example right here. All right. It says how to set the text for the next sibling. And the key word is what they use in there, and that's chaining. What that says is you want to run this routine. Then the output of that routine becomes the input to this routine. All right. So when you chain stuff together, it does a bunch of different methods, and it goes from left to right, where the output from the first method becomes the input to the second method. The output from the second method becomes the input to the third method, etc. All right. And not that it's a big thing, but if you would choose to, what some people do is if they have a lot of this chaining, is they take each dot and put it on its own line. So dot next would be on one line, paren, then on another line would be dot text, and then the parentheses last name is required. You don't have to do that. But otherwise, if you chain enough, it'll scroll off the screen unless you've got word wrap set up. All right. So again, to call the method, as it says, it's a selector, the dot operator and the method name. It's what we just looked at. Chaining, again, as it says, it's one method after the other. All right. The event methods, and one of the reasons that I went through the thing that we did before the break is now you've been introduced to all this stuff. All right. Now, I didn't show you this before, but rather than typing it in like this, $document.ready, okay, you can just use the $. All right. I tend to, even though it's more code, to use the document.ready myself, not because you have to do that, but that sends a signal to me that I'm using jQuery. All right. But you can do it either way. In the examples that I'm going to go through with you, the ones that we'll start with next week, all right, I am going to, in those examples, I'm going to do it the long way. All right. So notice here, how to attach an event handler to the click event. So what this would do would be, imagine that you had a web page and that web page had lots of H2s on it. Doesn't matter how many there are. Let's say that it has 10. If you single mouse clicked on any of those 10 H2s, it would bring up an alert. Now this example is contrived. What I mean is it's a stupid example, but it's showing you that you can work with all H2s at one time if you'd want to do that. What if I only want one H2? Well, then you give that one H2 an ID. Or if there's several, maybe you don't want all 10, but maybe all the odd number ones. Then you give those a class. All right. Notice that second bullet there that says the event handler for the ready event runs any methods that it contains as soon as the DOM is ready. Even if the browser is still loading images. So if you preloaded images that we talked about in an earlier chapter, it says using this ready is like using the DOM content loaded that we had been using previously. All right. Now notice in this book, the ready event is always coded the long way. All right. If you've been working with it for a while, you probably would never use the long way. You do it the short way all the time. All right. And finally, look at this last bullet. When coding one event handler within another, you've already seen this. Within the ready event, we had the click event, for example. The use of closing braces, parentheses, and semicolons is critical. That's why, as it says, sometimes people put comments in there to let you know that this end ready goes with the one up here, and this end click goes with the one up here. And you might say, well, you can tell by the way that they're tabbed over. Yeah, and that would be just fine using something like an editor like we're using with VS Code. But if you looked at it with a simple editor, it might be a lot harder to figure that out. All right, so first is this email list application. Again, you've seen this thing before several times. The HTML is not changing. All right. You'll notice they do have a couple spans in here, and they're not showing here because you've already run it. But basically, those will be replaced either with an error message or being empty. All right. And then look at the bottom here. Here's where we're adding the minified version of jQuery, in fact, the slim version. All right. And then our email list. Now, I didn't try doing this before, but when we went to cdnjs.com, all right, I don't know because I've never tried this. Can you put in slim jQuery? It looks like it's not finding it. How about jQuery slim? And there it is. Well, there's slim scroll. I don't know if one of these is the slim or not. I really don't know. All right, I'd have to go and take a look at it. All right, so the JavaScript and the jQuery, let's look at it. Well, notice again, everything that you see here is inside of, okay, it ends right there and it starts right there. The logic is exactly the same as what we looked at before. Now notice we're saying next text. We're not saying next adjacent sibling. Again, it's one example of how we talked about it. The idea is there's typically less code that you're going to write with jQuery as opposed to writing the same code with JavaScript. All right, notice in here, it's not dot value anymore. It's dot val because that's how you do it in jQuery. And if you do this and you put in dot value, all right, you're either going to get error messages or else nothing's going to happen. All right, but other than that, I mean, the logic is the same as what we've looked at before. Again, notice that when you're clearing dot val, not dot value, and dot next, not dot next adjacent sibling or, dot value, etc. All right, so one thing to realize, and I'm sure you all do, this thing was entitled right here, the most useful selectors. Well, that's what the authors say. I'm not saying they aren't useful selectors. They are. But there might be some that are not in here that you'd use often. There might be some that are in here that you very rarely use. All right. You'll notice that most of them are in here as they're shown. All right. Since they're selectors, they're prefaced with a colon. All right. So let's look at some examples. The first one that you see right there, it says how to select the LI elements that are the first child of their parent element. All right. In other words, the first LI. How to select the even table row elements from a table. All right. Now, they do mention here in chapter 9, we'll talk about another selector that's used quite often that's not in here. And that's when you use it for animation. All right. The key thing to understand about this, if you say, oh, I'm just going to start memorizing, if you can memorize everything that's in here and how to use it, you're a better person than I am. All right. But it's knowing, oh, I think that's called this method, and then going to the jQuery API documentation and looking for an example. All right. Some methods. Some of these we've already seen in here. You've seen the next. Prev or previous is just the opposite of next. All right. And I'm not going to read all these to you. You can see them. Now, there's some in here that are important. Like, for example, what you see in here that says add class. You can add classes to elements. Why is that important? Well, as an example, if you have set up a web page that is designed to be interactive, all right? So you ask a person a question or maybe a series of questions on a web page. And depending upon the answers that they give, you might show one bit of text or a different bit of text. All right. And I'm not talking here like exactly like a male-female thing. All right. But let's say, for example, that it was some kind of a sports website. And you ask the person, what is your favorite sport? And they say baseball. The World Series just ended yesterday. All right. And then you could come in and just do an add class where you would only make available articles about baseball, as an example. All right. Remove would be just the opposite. Toggle, you've actually seen a toggle, but not a toggle class. Some of them just make sense. Hide and show. All right. But you take a look at the examples that are in here, and you take a look at the examples that are in the chapter. We've already looked a little bit, and we didn't spend much time on it, but we looked a little bit here at the example for the email list, and we'll look at a couple more, or a few more. All right, event methods. Here's some more. You already know what the ready event is. We've already looked at the click event. All right, the mouse enter, the mouse over, and the mouse out. They're used a lot, again, when you want to do like an image swap. All right, the hover is just that. So you can hover over anything you want. So when you move over something, all right, when you move over something, you can have it change color or do whatever if that's what you want. Now, we looked a little bit in the last chapter, not much, but a little bit about using that E in there. And I said you could use E or the word event or EVT. All right. Well, notice they're using EVT in here also. So notice a double click event for all text boxes. All right. So what that will do is any text box that you have in there that you double click, it'll remove whatever value is in there. A hover event. Some of this stuff actually gets built in. For instance, you may or may not have noticed that, but like when you use Bootstrap, all right, you can set your tables up that basically have a hover so that once you take your mouse and you put it on a certain row in a table, typically it gets darker. All right. The prevent default we've already talked about. Typically you associate that, not always, but you typically associate that with an anchor link to make sure that it doesn't go anywhere, or with a button to make sure that something is not submitted. All right. Again, notice that the bottom bullet here. This figure does not present all event methods. So there's a lot more things that you can do that are not shown here. All right, other things that you should be aware of, kind of a hodgepodge type of thing. All right. On and off. On, as it says, attaches an event handler to something. Off removes it. Well, the on is kind of like what we did when we did an add event listener. All right. And even though we didn't do any work with it, there's also a remove event listener, which is what the off is like. All right. Then notice there's a one, which says attach that event handler to something, but after it runs, then immediately remove it. So it's a one and done type of thing. All right. And trigger, it says trigger the event for the selected element. So if you want something special to happen. All right. And again, they've got examples in here. Okay. It doesn't really pay much to go through partial examples like the ones that are here. Says some methods in jQuery have shortcuts. And it says if you use the shortcut, you're actually using the on method. All right. And you don't really have to worry about it. All right. It just, there are a bunch of things out there, if you go out to the API. All right. Now it says there used to be things, and this was a pain to do binds and unbinds, but they were deprecated earlier when 3.0 came. It said you might see them, but you shouldn't use them. It just makes it harder to work with. All right. So the last, I don't know, 10 to 15 pages of the chapter go through 3 different applications. And we're going to bring each one of those up and take a look at them in turn. So again, should look familiar to you. All right. And there is the HTML, that hasn't changed. There's the CSS, that hasn't changed. But what has changed in here is the JavaScript and jQuery. And there's not really a lot of it. I should have you note that it's still important for you to put your use strict at the top. All right. And then everything is inside of our document.ready. All right. Notice what they're doing. Attaching event handlers for all H2 tags. That starts here. that ends here. That means all the code that runs in here, you want to have run when you click any H2 tags that are part of an ID named FAQS. And if you remember that from before, oops, sorry, went the wrong way. All right. In our HTML, everything is inside of FAQS. So we can bring this one up. All right, we can bring this one up, and I've got it here. So let me close this and this. All right, and we'll close the email list and we'll bring up FAQ. Again, there's the HTML file. Here's our JavaScript file. This is the same thing they just showed in the book. All right, and if we bring that in here, and then we come in, I don't know what happened there, except I screwed it up. Oh, I don't know what I just did. Let me reload that. That will look like this. Right, cleaner anyway. All right. So if we run this, it's going to look exactly the same as what we've been doing. I've got it blown up. I mean, 100% would be like this. So I blew it up so you can see everything. But notice, got the plus sign, boom, turns into a minus sign. When you open up, now you can open up multiple. We could add code. When you click it again, it disappears. All right, but we're going to implement something like this. I've got a jQuery FAQ page, I'm sorry, a BMI FAQ page that I created. It's not styled very nicely. There's not a lot of styling that I did on this website. It looks okay, but you could come in and change the, put a box around it or whatever like they do. I didn't do any of that stuff. All right. But again, the key thing when you look in here is this is the same stuff. The main difference, again, as opposed to having a loop like we did before, everything is done here inside of the click event. All right. Now notice on the bottom in the description here on the bottom of the page, when you attach an event handler to a link, you often need to cancel the default action. That's that event.cancel. All right, because it thinks you want to open something. That's why they call the prevent default. We looked at that in earlier examples as well. Now, the next one is a little bit new. It's an image swap. There are other ways that you can do an image swap other than the way they're going to show it here. All right, but with this one, as soon as you highlight one of these, this will change. We looked at other ways of doing it a chapter or two ago using vanilla JavaScript. So there's a lot of ways that this can be done. And again, if we look at that example, all right, I think that's the swap one. Then what you see when you look in here is what? Well, look, notice image list a dot each. This is the equivalent of a for loop. We're telling it to load each image. All right. There is no for loop per se in jQuery. Set up all of the A's so that when you click, this happens. Same kind of thing we did earlier. Move the focus to the first thumbnail so when it starts, all right, LI, the first child, move it to the first anchor link of the LI. So again, if we come in here and we run this, it's going to look just the same as it did when we did this previously. Again, I can make it smaller now, but you get the idea. As soon as I click on one of these, you can see how it changes. Now they're using click. We could have even used, for instance, we could have used like a mouse over and a mouse out, where maybe this one came up. And if you did a mouse over, it would change to this. And as soon as you pulled it back out, it would change to the first one. There's a lot of different things that can be used here and a lot of different ways that the stuff in here can be done. And I know I've said this before, but I'm going to continue saying it. Anything that you do with this, anything that you do with jQuery can be done with vanilla or regular JavaScript. So this is the code we just looked at. So if we look at the description here, when you use jQuery to work with images that aren't included in the HTML, preloading, well, you can still preload. We talked about that before in an earlier chapter. All right, then there's a rollover example. All right, so let's take a look at that one. I keep doing that, I don't know. But... All right, and we'll look at the JavaScript in a minute, but let's just bring this up and run it. We did this one before in regular or vanilla JavaScript. All right, that's why I'm saying anything you do with jQuery, you can do just with regular JavaScript. Oftentimes, doing it with, quote, regular JavaScript or with vanilla JavaScript or whatever you want to call that, all right, is going to result in more code. So again, if we come back to our book here and take a look. All right, the HTML hasn't changed. The JavaScript and the jQuery, if I brought the old stuff in, it has gone down by quite a few lines. All right, and that's it for this chapter. Now, this chapter was not designed to make you an expert. I've already mentioned this to you, that if you want to learn how to use this stuff, all right, I've just lectured on chapter 8. I'm going to go right into chapter 9 in a minute. But I would start by going out to W3 schools and going through their jQuery tutorial. Again, though, there's no tests on this. All right, there's no test. There is no written test, no hands-on test, no labs, no homework on this. All right. All right, so let's jump into the next chapter. How to use effects and animations. So they mentioned this chapter presents methods for effects and animations. The key thing about this is when you go through it, as it says, remember, the primary goal of a website is usability. So don't put in so many special effects and so much animation that the message that you're trying to get across with the website goes away, for lack of better words. Now, you'll also look at the bottom paragraph in here. As you read this chapter, you might find it difficult to understand how some of these work until you actually see them in action. I would definitely agree with that. All right, let me close this. And in here, in chapter 9, you notice there's a bunch of examples. All right, and what they do is they keep building on things. All right, so they like make a slideshow, etc. And they do a bunch of work like that, and they keep building on it. So we've got a slideshow application with effects, and then we go in and use animation, and then we do a carousel. All right, and they go through all of these. Now, this is not going to take that long. All right, I'm not going to be surprised if we're done by 10:30 today. I'll just go through the whole chapter. When I'm done, you'll have the rest of the period. My goal was to give you at least an hour today, and ideally an hour and a half. So if you're still working on the test, you can do that. All right. Okay. As it says, the chapter starts by presenting the basic methods for effects. So if we look in here, again, some of these I've already shown you. You go to the jQuery UI and you go under that effects, you can see all of these in action plus more. All right. And again, I'm not going to read any of them to you. Like I said, you can just take a look. But until you actually do see these in action, they're probably not going to mean very much to you. All right. Now, look at this because it's kind of important. With some of this stuff, as it says, you've got what's called a duration parameter. Okay. And you can put your own number in there, and it's a number in milliseconds. So you can tell it 5 seconds, 1 second, etc. Or you can use the words slow and fast. Okay, as it says, 400 milliseconds is slow, 200 milliseconds is fast. All right. And the only way that it's going to make any sense to you, all right, is if you sit and play with them. Now, there's also something in here that's called a callback parameter. This is unbelievably important because especially those of you who next semester will be taking the AWD1111 database-driven website development class. We do a lot of work in there with callback parameters. As it says, it's a function that is called after the event has finished. So in other words, what we're doing here is what we're basically saying, hey, have this fade in, all right? And once it does, then call this, all right? And again, that's referred to as a callback. As they say, the callback parameter is for a function that's called after the effect is finished. If there's more than one element, the callback is run one time for each of the elements. So again, if this was H2, for example, it would run this for every H2 element. And quite often you will use chaining in here because again, when you start working with effects and animation is just a type of effect. When you come in and start to do that, there's typically a lot of things that you want to do. And we're going to start showing you this. Here's the FAQ app. All right. But notice, let's just bring that one up. So this is FAQ. Notice there's 4 different ones. So here's FAQ with effects. And I'm not going to go over that other than to just run it for you first and just open it. Now watch what happens when we select one. All right, it did the slide down. Click it again, it does the slide up. Now again, that's not that big of a thing, but you could use any of these that we looked at when we were out on jQuery UI in here. You probably wouldn't want to do something like explode. You could, but it would probably look really weird. But for an FAQ page, that isn't bad. And what we're doing here too is this is the amount of time it's taking to do this. All right. And you've got control over all of that stuff. All right. Then they have another one of these. And this one uses animation. And then you'll notice that with this one, when we come in and run it, okay, there you go. Okay. Now it still looks the same, but it doesn't do anything. It all happens at the start. That doesn't mean you'd have to do it like that, but that's how they did it in here. Again, it's just a demo of how you can do animation. All right. And when we come in here and you start to look at this stuff again, hopefully what you notice is there's not a whole boatload of JavaScript or really jQuery code in here. All right. Animate all H1s. Make them 2 3/4 times the size they were. Give them full opacity and have them coming from the left to the right. All right. And doing that then, after you get done, then fade in after this is done, after the H1 has been put in, have each one of the F2s, all right, fade in and then fade out. That's the callback right there. All right. Then there's another one in here. And it's going to look, I think it's going to look the same as the other one, but they use chaining. All right, just so you can see that. Not sure exactly what this one is doing, but we'll take a look at the JavaScript. All right, there is chaining right there. And as I mentioned, you typically put each event that you want to have happen, you put on its own line. You don't have to do that, but it's just something that's done quite often. Finally, the last one that's in here on this has got easing. And easing, let's run it, and then we'll talk about what it is. See, it's got kind of a bounce effect right there. All right. And again, you've got control over how this is done. And what I mean is when you work with easing, typically you do it one of two or three ways. You typically start it out real fast and then slow it down, or start it out real slow and then speed it up. You typically, even though you can have it stay at the same rate all the time, that's not typically done. You either go from slow to fast or fast to slow. That's typically how all of this is done. All right. So again, they've got several examples in here. All right. Then they've got a slideshow, as it says, with effects. So they're going to do the same kind of thing in here. Again, you have control when you're working with a slideshow. So in other words, you can have this fade in or have this fade out and another one fade in. You've got control over how long it's going to last on the screen, etc. So again, close this. And if we look here, you notice that we've got 3 versions of a slideshow. And if we look at the first one, it's, as it says, it's fading 1. Again, you can say, well, that's quite a bit. That's 25 lines. That's really not a lot of code in here. All right, if we bring this up, let's see what's happening. I'm not touching it. Now, the only thing I don't like about this example is they used images that are different sizes. It looks much more uniform, much nicer if your images can all be made of the same size. All right, it's not that there's anything wrong with what they're doing. There isn't. I just think it would look better if they use some kind of software to make all of them be the same size. All right. Here's fading 2. Now here they are almost the same size. All right, not quite, but almost. That looks terrible. I think that's just me because they stretched it, but it wouldn't take that much. Even you could use something like GIMP that I mentioned to you, GIMP, which is a free package that you can use that will automate a lot of this stuff for you. And again, not really, not even 25 lines there. All right. And that's what most people, when they start to use jQuery, they're like, geez, I got a lot less code in here than I used to have. Yeah, that's one of the reasons it's as popular as it is. And the last one, a little bit more. All right, but this has got the ability, I believe this is the one that allows you to stop when this thing is going. So I clicked on it and it's going to stop until I click it again. Then, so if I want to stop here, and again, this isn't a great example. All right, but imagine, it's not to say that we couldn't have some text in here as well. So maybe you want to stop on one or more pages. All right. All right. Now it says, by now it should be obvious that you can code jQuery applications in many different ways. It says, in fact, one problem is learning the way that you should do it. Well, I mean, again, that's going to be them telling you what you should do. So if we take a look in here, all they're doing is they're giving you two ways of doing the same thing. All right. And it's not, they both have the document ready and the use strict, but it's just two different ways of doing the same thing. All right. So for instance, in here, notice they're using timers, set interval, and they're going through it with timers, having it change every 3 seconds. And here's another way where you're not using intervals. We're telling it to fade out after 3 seconds. All right. You can get the same effect, but doing it in different ways. All right. Already talked a little bit about this start and stop the slideshow. There's the start. There's the stop. All right. As it says with this code, you can stop the slideshow by clicking on a slide and then restart it by clicking on it again. All right. It says so the code for the slideshow doesn't have to be repeated. It's coded as an arrow function and put in a constant, well, like we've been doing. Now it says because the run slideshow is an arrow function, it must be defined before the set interval that calls it. Otherwise, you're going to get an error. So again, with some of the stuff that you do, the order in which you put things will matter. With some of the things you do, the order in which you put things will not matter. All right. But again, as always, the best way for you to learn it is to just sit and play with it. All right. Animation is a special kind of effect. All right. Animation is sort of a pain because there's different things that you have to remember to do with it. All right. The examples that they give here, they're not good. All right. This one right here, I don't know why they're having this move. And if you look, even in the W3 schools thing, I know that at least some of the animation examples, they just make a div that basically is a box and they have it move around on the screen. All right. Not like that's that big of a thing. All right. But it's all predicated by you using the animate. All right. And again, I know I've shown you this before, but if I go back here again to jQueryui.com and I come over here and I search for animate, there's color animation, for example. All right. That's the example they have in here. Okay. It's pretty obvious. You can see what's happening. It's getting bigger. The background color is changing. The text color is changing. Okay. So when you work on this, okay, it says here's an animate that doesn't have a callback function. So it does this and then boom, it's done. Here, it has a callback function. It's shown down here. So as it says, all right, it's for the H1 heading with a callback. So as they mentioned on the bottom of the page, the CSS properties are changed to properties in what's called the property map. All right, it's kind of a pain. I'm not going to read any of this to you. You use the same stuff, but again, timers and timing becomes even more important here. Because if you have an animation that comes by too fast, All right, the user probably won't even notice it, no matter how cool it is. If it's too slow, they might find it boring and we don't want to get out of it. So it's a lot of it is just sitting there and playing around with it till you get it where you want it to be. All right, we've talked about chaining already. And again, that was the example I showed you. So there's chaining. All right. Now notice the next thing says queued animations. What that means is do this. When you're done, do this. When you're done, do this. And it will do that. It will cue things. The problem can be if you're doing a lot of animations where you're queuing stuff up, you want to make sure usually that your one animation is completed before the next one starts. Otherwise, it looks, for lack of better words, real blotchy with what you're trying to do. The examples that we're going to do next week are relatively simple. All right. And again, as it says, when you chain effects and animations, they're placed in a queue. They're run in sequence. If they ran at the same time, it would just look like a mess. All right. In some cases, a problem occurs if the user starts a second animation before the first one finishes. Like I said, for lack of better words, at best, it'll look really clunky. It just won't look good. All right. All right. So there are delays, there are stops, and there are finishes. Okay. Well, the easiest one is stop. If I want an animation to stop, all right, it stops the animation in the queue. Whatever's running, it stops it. Delay will delay it for happening for a certain number of milliseconds. And finish basically tells it you're done now. Again, the examples they give in here, in my humble opinion, aren't that good. All right. So again, and here, notice what it says. On here, when you're doing a mouse over, you can see how it moves down a little bit. It's not that big a thing. All right. I don't even know if that one is in here or not. That's swap animation. I don't think that that one is actually in here, but we can look. So it is changing and it's going down as well, the image, and it pops right back up then. Right. And like I said, I have seen so many sites where people do that and they've got really cool animation. All right. But the message of the site is lost because all people care about is the cool animation. All right. Easings we mentioned, and notice what it says. An easing determines the way in which an animation is performed. For instance, it can start slowly and pick up speed as it goes, or it can start or end with a bounce. There's a lot of different ways that this can be done. jQuery, as it says, provides two easings. Linear, where typically it does move at a uniform speed, and swing. You saw a little bit of that, and I'm not going to go back to it. But again, if you go back to the jQuery, in fact, I will, just to show you this. You go back to that jQuery UI, all right, and you go wherever the effects was, all right. You can run all those. That's the best way to learn. I mean, some of these, like this one, I always love the shake. All right. Some people really like that. It makes sense for for you to put it in there. Other people, I would never use that. Okay. All right. And again, code to give you the code. So easing refers to the way the animation is performed. All right. Now it says plugins provide many other types of easings. We're going to talk about plugins next week, but there are a boatload of things that people have already written for jQuery. All right. For instance, if I come in here and type in jQuery plugins, you'll notice that plugins.jquery.com. This is what's called the plugin registry. These are things that people have made. I'm not going to add these up, but I'll bet you it's at least 2,000. All right. So, if you want to do different things with images, there's 210 different plugins that you can use. So rather than reinventing the wheel, if you want to do something, it's always good to go in there and check here. There's also, if you go out and Google it, you'll find that there's a lot of plugins that are out there that are free. And other than the one I just showed, the site I just showed you, there's plenty of plugins that are out there that you pay for. And again, that'll be the source of chapter 11. All right. Then they finally tell you how to work in with queues. All right. I think that's just about it for the chapter. Oh, nope, there's a carousel app. All right. This is the carousel. So the idea is as you click over here, it'll flip. And as you click over here, it'll flip the other way type of an idea. We've already done a little bit of work with carousels. We did it with Bootstrap. All right. You can do it in here as well. Now, is there a big advantage to using jQuery for carousels? I'm going to tell you my opinion, no. All right. But I suppose if you want to go in and combine them with some of the special effects, all right, to do some of the stuff, then there might be. All right. So that's it. I do want to say one last time because I want to make sure people hear this. All right. Let me open these up again. So your homework for Sunday is to go to that freecodecamp.org and under the Learn JavaScript algorithms and data structures, where there is those, I think it's 113 lectures, you should give me proof that you finished it. Take a screenshot of your completion. For the other part, for chapter 7, you're going to begin what comes after that, which is the ES6. Do the first 6 of the ones that are in there. All right. And also do the written test for 6 and the written test for 7. All right. As I mentioned to you, tomorrow I plan on grading in the morning. So you should be able to look sometime in the afternoon, hopefully tomorrow. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. There's a good third of the class that when I looked, you had very little stuff in there completed. All right. And as I mentioned, if you didn't hear this when you came in this morning, all right, or listening earlier in the lecture, what I'm going to do is, people always say, can I turn in work late? Yes. How much credit do I get? It depends on how late it is. If we did something in week 1 and you turned it in week 10, you'd get very little points for it, but you'd get something. All right. And finally, again, as I mentioned on Monday, before we go through 10 and 11, we're going to first go through and I will do for you the test. I'm not going to save it. All right. But I'm going to go out there and do the problems that are on the test. We're going to do that and then go over chapters 10 and 11. Starting probably then on Tuesday, we will begin building this website. All right. It'll be a code along. I'll even give you some of the stuff, but I'm most concerned with us doing the JavaScript and jQuery together. All right. That'll be the rest of the week. Then the following week, all right, just so you're aware of it, the following week, if I go back here, we're going to go over 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. Now, most of what we go over on here will be 12 and 13. That'll probably be one period, and this might even be just part of a period. Again, no homework on that. All right, no tests, etc. But I want everybody to know, I'm writing it right now. When we get done to that point, all right, so the week of Thanksgiving, you are going to be given what's called a final. And no, you're going to have a couple weeks to work on it. So no, I don't want to ruin your Thanksgiving holiday, but it'll be to create a complete website that is responsive, that'll have JavaScript in it. You can put in jQuery or you can do it without jQuery. You can do it all in vanilla JavaScript, and it'll be worth 200 points, just like when we did the 2 bootstrap tests, and they were each worth 100 points. All right, I will give that to you probably. I'm not sure exactly, like not the, let's see. I'm going to guess right now, today is the 2nd, so tomorrow's the 3rd, probably on the 17th, that Friday. All right, I mentioned to you this before, the week of Thanksgiving, I will be off all week and unavailable. All right, plus I'm still supposed to take 3 more days off, otherwise I'm going to lose them. And I'm working with Evan to try to come up with the best days to do that. I'll let you know when I know. All right. After we get done with that stuff and after, so after Thanksgiving, we're not going to jump into this. After Thanksgiving, we're going to go into something called React and spend 2 weeks on that. Then during the last week, I'll lecture on this one day again, no homework, no labs, no written tests, no nothing, just so you've seen it. And what I tend to do the last week of class, we meet Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. All right. If you've got everything turned in, you're basically going to be done. It's going to be time for people who are behind on work to finish it up. But what I will do during the last week of class is I will spend 1/2 hour during a period giving you a little primer, those of you who are going to take the AWD 1100 C# class in spring, so you know what's in that class, and another 1/2 hour or so primer for those of you who will be taking the AWD 1111 database-driven website development class in spring. All right, and that will be taped, of course. All right, that's all I have. Again, please be working on your test. If you do have questions, let me know what they are, and I'll try as much as I can to work with you. All right, if I can give you help, I'll try to give you help. Other than that, tomorrow's lab, so have a good weekend. I will talk to you all on Monday morning. See you then. Thanks.